Hari Om. Oh, Gajananam Bhutaganadisevitam Kapitthajambu Phalasarabhakshitam Umasutam Shoka Vinashakaranam Namami Vigneshwara Pada Pankajam. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste. Welcome to DISHA 3 of a new series, which is an inward journey to discover our inner strength and happiness through Bhagavad Gita. Friends, plot is now set for the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavan Sri Krishna now assumes the role of Guru after Arjuna confesses his helplessness and surrenders with a request to guide him. Through Arjuna, Gita Acharya Krishna is teaching this wonderful Gita Upanishads to all of us. Let's listen to this from Dr. Hegde sir himself. Apart from this, Dr. Hegde sir will also be covering the topic on Atma from Tattva and spirituality through story. This will be followed by quiz time by Dr. Sandhya Ravi. Now, before Dr. Hegde sir introduces us to the day's topic, let's understand the meaning of shloka Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva from Dr. Anupama Shetty. Anupama madam.
Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Kayena vacha manasendriyairva buddhyatmana va prakrite svabhavat karomi yat yat sakalam parasmai narayanaeti samarpayami. This means that whatever I do, Kayena vacha manase indriyaihi, either as a physical action with my body, the kaya, or by the utterance of words, vacha, or as thoughts using my mind, or by the use of my sense organs, indriyani, buddhyatmava prakritehi swabhavat, either by the use of my intellect, buddhi, or with my ego, Atma, or by the compulsive force of my own nature. Prakrite svabhavat could mean my vasanas. Karomi yadyat sakalam parasmai. I offer them entirely to the Supreme Lord. Narayana iti samarpayami. To Lord Narayana, I dedicate every single deed of mine. This unconditional surrender of thoughts, words, and actions to the Lord is the essence of Karma Yoga. Here we see Ishvara Arpana Bhava as the dedication of every deed to the Lord. Vyavasayatmika Buddhi as the single-minded consecration of all my deeds. Samatva Bhava as the elimination of selfishness, and Prasada Buddhi as the willingness to accept whatever the Lord ordains as the deserved result for me. What is the benefit of this? Anxiety is eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anupama. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. The DISHA topics are revision topics clubbed with Tattva Bodha topics. Today we will be studying verses 11 to 16 of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And as these chapters talk essentially about our true nature or Atma, the Tattva Bodha topic will also be about Atma. So by the end of this talk, we should be very clear about these 6 aspects about Atma. What is Atma? Where is this Atma located? What is my relationship with Atma? What is the nature of this knowledge? Is this Atma Vidya different from other kinds of knowledge? How do I get to know this Atma, and what is the benefit of knowing Atma? Atma is my true nature, my higher self or my real self. We now know, as we come into the world of spirituality, we are not just this body-mind complex. We are this body-mind with Atma. And the more we enter into the field of Vedanta, we realize we are actually this Atma incidentally using this body-mind. So the more we have an understanding, we will see I am Atma temporarily using this body. The definition of Atma in Sanskrit is apnoti sarvam iti Atma, that which pervades everything. So my true nature is limitless and all-pervading. And my true nature is of the nature of Sat Chit Ananda. That's why when I say I am represents the existence part of the Sat part. When I say I, only a conscious person can talk about I. And this I am is not a limited I am, but it is an all-pervasive, limitless I am. And whenever we know my own limitlessness, I experience Anantatvam or Ananda. And there is a Mahavakya which we need to claim again and again, I am Atma Brahma. So the second question is easily answered. If I am all-pervading, where am I located? I should be located everywhere. But if I'm everywhere, where do I discover this Atma? Figuratively, the scriptures talk of in the cave of my heart, literally means I have to see or discover this Atma in my own mind as that conscious principle because of which I'm able to listen, because of which I'm able to be alive, because of which I'm able to experience this whole world. What is my relationship with Atma? Atma is my true nature. And therefore, more than claiming this body-mind, I need to shift this idea, I am Atma, incidentally using this body-mind. This knowledge or Atma Vidya is very different from all the other knowledges that we acquire in school and colleges. Any knowledge that we acquire in our universities is objective knowledge. That means I can study about the heart or the brain or any other object. Whenever I study about an object indirectly, that means the object is not in front of me, but I have literature, I have books about it. That indirect knowledge is called Paroksha Jnanam. One day when I'm able to see the heart or the lung physically, I'm able to touch it and use my sense organs. When I see the object of interest, when I travel to my Mount Kailash and I see it with my own eyes, that knowledge which was Paroksha now has become Pratyaksha. Is that true with Atma Vidya? No. Because about myself, I already have a certain experience, but the teachers will now introduce myself to myself. That new introduction to myself is neither Paroksha nor Pratyaksha. The technical word used is Aparoksha. And therefore, Atma Vidya is not about any object. Atma Vidya is about the essential subject, which is also called Aprameya. Now, this is a very important term to have a clear understanding of what is this Aprameya. Now, Prameyam is any object of my experience. For example, this laptop in front of me is a Prameyam, is an object of my experience. How do I get to know this Prameyam? Through this body-mind. The instrument that I use to get to know this laptop is called a Pramana. When I use this Pramana, that means my body-mind, and I experience this Prameyam, I become a knower of the laptop in front of me. That limited knower is called a Pramata. This knowledge that this is a laptop is called a Prama. But all this is possible because of consciousness, which is the ultimate knower, which can never be an object of my experience. And that is called Aprameya. About this, we should be very clear. How do I get Atma Vidya? This is possible through the guidance of a competent Acharya. And the process is called Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. I go to the teacher and systematically and consistently study Vedantic scriptures for a length of time. That is what is called Shravanam. But then a lot of doubts come, either through the teacher or through my colleagues. All these doubts are cleared. Unless my doubts are cleared, this knowledge is going to be not something that I can digest. Once my doubts have been cleared, then I internalize this teaching through a process of meditation called Nididhyasanam. Ultimately, Brahma Vidya or Atma Vidya that I am Brahman, not this body-mind complex, should be not a matter of belief. Whenever something is a matter of belief, during emotionally upsetting situations, my belief can disappear. But if it is a knowledge, 2 plus 2 will always remain 4, even when I am very sorrowful. I may say it in a sorrowful way, but knowledge will not change in upsetting situations. Therefore, this Atma Vidya should be an aspect of my knowledge, not a matter of belief. What is the benefit of knowing Atma Vidya? Atma Vidya, knowing that I am Atma and not this perishing body-mind complex, can give me complete fulfillment. I realize I have been there from the very beginning. There is no question of birth. If there is no question of birth, there is no question of death. If there is no question of death, there is no question of rebirth. I realize I am eternal. And this very understanding can help me to discover a higher nature. And it is a kind of an awakening to a higher level of realization, which is called true liberation or moksha. All our spiritual texts, like the Upanishads, seek to get Atma Vidya only. And all these Upanishads, like the Mundaka Upanishad, begins with an amazing question where Shaunaka comes to the teacher Angirasa with a very significant question, and he says, "Oh Bhagavan, what is that knowing which everything becomes known?" And the teacher answers it in a very sequential way. The teacher gives Atma Vidya, but the predominance in the Mundaka Upanishad is to discover Atma as everything that is existent. I see myself as existent. I see this computer as existent. To understand Atma as existence is the speciality of the Mundaka Upanishad. Whereas in Kenopanishad, the student comes to the teacher and asks the same thing about Atma Vidya. But the question is, Bhagavan, I'm able to hear, I'm able to speak, I'm able to walk. What is that force that makes me do all these things? And the teacher introduces Atma as Chit or consciousness. In the Chandogya Upanishad, the student is the great Narada, highly qualified, comes to his older brother Sanat Kumara, who's none other than an avatara of Lord Subramaniam. And his question is, I have all kinds of knowledge. In spite of being so knowledgeable, there is a feeling of incompleteness. I don't have a sense of Purnatvam. And there is always a feeling of sorrow within me. Can you please help me? And the teacher, Sanat Kumara, introduces him to Atma Vidya in the form of Bhuma Vidya. Bhuma Vidya means to discover your own limitlessness. When I discover that I have no limitations, I experience Anantatvam, and wherever there is no limitations, I have Ananda. Now let us see how Tattva Bodha, the fundamental text, describes Atma. Atma Kaha. Stula Sukshma Karana Sharira Vyatirekta. That means this Atma is something other than the gross body, the subtle body, the causal body. It is Pancha Kosha Atita. It is beyond the 5 koshas. Avastha Sakshi, Avastha Traya Sakshi. It is the witness of my Jagrat, Swapna, and the Shushupti. Satchidananda Swarupa San. It is the nature of Sat Chit Ananda. Ya Tishtati Saha Atma. This definition we all should know. The Tattva Bodha continues with the question, Atma Tarhi Kaha. What is this self? Satchidananda Swarupa. It is of the nature of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It continues, Sat Kim. What is this Sat or existence? And the Tattva Bodha replies, Kalatraya api tishtati iti sat. That which is there in Jagrat, Swapna, Shushupti. It is there in all 3 periods of time. That is called Sat. Chit Kim. What is this consciousness? Jnana Swarupa. I am conscious. I am aware. I am able to listen. That awareness in me, Tattva Bodha says, is Chit. Ananda Kaha. Sukha Swarupa is Ananda. So in conclusion, my true nature is of the nature of consciousness. This consciousness is the real me. It is that which lends existence to my body-mind. It gives existence to the whole world. Unbelievable, but true. The real me is nirguna. There are no attributes. When I have no attributes in time, I realize I am eternal or I am Mityā. When there is no attributes in space, I realize I'm not only here, but I am everywhere. And when I have no attributes in objects, I pervade everything. That means I include everything in this world. I am Ekaha. This is the nature of Atma. In conclusion on this Atma topic, Swamiji gives us 5 capsules to remember all the time. And this is a matter of claiming that I am of the nature of eternal, all-pervading consciousness. I as Atma am the only source of permanent peace, security, and happiness. By my mere presence, I enliven this body. And through this body, I experience the world around me. I am never affected by anything that happens to the world around me or to this body and mind, because as Atma, I am of a higher order of reality. Just like if anything happens to me in my dream, it really does not affect me once I am awake. Once I am awake to my Atma Jnanam, once I claim I am Atma, anything that happens to the world around me, the body and mind, cannot affect me. By forgetting this, life becomes a burden. By remembering this, my life becomes a blessing. With this background, let us enter into these 6 verses, 6 very key verses, which in DISHA should, if properly studied, should give us inner strength. The first verse, Shamala, if you can chant for me.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha Ashocyananvashocastvam Prajnavadamscha bhashase Gatasunagatasumscha Nanushocanti pandita.
We'll focus on the last line, na anusochanti panditaha. Pandita means a person who has awoken to Atma Vidya, one who knows who he or she truly is as Atma. Krishna declares in this opening teaching verse number 11, such a person, na anusochanti. He is never sorrowful. He never goes into depression. He may feel sad, but never becomes depressed, never becomes sorrowful. Gatasun, agatasuncha. The word asu represents prana or breath. Gatasun means one whose last breath has gone. Agatasun means one whose last breath has not yet gone. Now Krishna is saying, a wise person does not grieve for those who are dead or those who are going to die. Now, these are 2 situations where a person can have intense sorrow. And immediately Krishna tells, oh Arjuna, you are speaking like a wise person. You are using wise words, but you are grieving for something that does not deserve grief because you do not know your true nature. Now, commentators, including Swamiji, has brought out the Anubandha Chatustaya, the 4 things that we need to study before we study any scripture. It is just like this. Before I buy a book in a bookstore, I turn to the last page to find out what is this book all about? What is the topic of this book? Is this book for me? What am I going to benefit? And these 4 things that we need to be very clear of is what is the Vishaya, what is the subject matter of Atma Vidya, what is the prayojan or the benefit for me, who is the adhikari, am I eligible for it? And then there is a sambandha, the relationship between Vishaya, prayojan and adhikari and so on. And the commentators and Swamiji have brought out that the Vishaya here is Brahma Vidya or Atma Vidya. Remember, Brahman and Atman are one and the same. In relation to the body, We call it as Atma. In relation to the total, it is called Brahma. So Brahma Vidya and Atma Vidya is the Vishaya of the entire Bhagavad Gita, starting from verse number 11. Prayojan, that means if I understand these verses, I'm not going to be sorrowful for long. I may feel sad, but I remember my FIR and I realize who I am and I recover very quickly. Adhikari is like one like Arjuna, who has surrendered to an Acharya. And the Sambandha is the relation between these three. Krishna addresses Arjuna with three approaches. One is the philosophical or the Adhyatmic approach, by trying to tell him you're not this body-mind complex, but you are this Atma. But remember, Arjuna is emotionally upset. And whenever you're emotionally upset, your intellect cannot function. And Krishna soon realizes that the philosophical approach is not going to work. He has to come down to the ethical or the dharmic approach, or even the worldly approach. What is the message for all of us? All of us go through difficult moments in our life. We will go through the winter of our lives. It is possible that the events that we may have to experience in future can be extremely emotionally demanding. And therefore, this Adhyatmic approach that you are eternal, you are not going to die, does not make sense when a person is emotionally upset. It has to be given to a person when he is in a calm state of mind. And therefore, when we are well, if we are able to study these things, when difficult moments come, when we have to go through the winter of our lives, our ability to handle that becomes much more better. Our scriptures talk about something called the Pratama Malla Nyaya. Pratama means the number one. Malla means a wrestler or a fighter. If you have to win over, or if you have to establish a new theory, you need to win over the present philosophers. And you need to find out among them who is the greatest. Now, in this context, Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is trying to bring out what is the most intense human suffering. The most intense form of human suffering is whenever someone whom you love, you might lose that person. The fact that even the thought of someone going away can produce intense amount of sorrow. It is said there can be no greater situation. If you are able to handle such a situation, you can handle, this is called Pratama Malla Nyaya. You will be able to handle any situation. Ultimately, Vedanta will give you a knowledge about our true self. And if you have a knowledge about our true self, this can be a matter of understanding. This can be a matter of knowledge, just like 2 + 2, and not a matter of belief, which can be knocked off in moments of intense emotional upsets. Krishna condenses the entire Gita Shastra in this 11th verse by giving this message. Self-knowledge, self-ignorance is the cause of all human problems. And therefore, self-knowledge is the way out. In Sanskrit, the same thing is said as Atma Ajnanam Samsara Karanam, Atma Jnanam Moksha Karanam. With moksha or through Atma Jnanam, I will be able to live in the world. But how do I live in the world? As a Jivan Mukta, I can experience freedom. So what is Krishna's message? Krishna's message is very clear. Krishna is seeing a sorrowful Arjuna, but he still has a smile on his face. And Krishna from the beginning repeats this many times, "O Arjuna." And through Arjuna, he's telling all of us, if there is some reason you feel sorrowful in your heart, you have not understood the message of the Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, through this DISHA, and DISHA is a method for us to go through the teaching again and again, so that we are able to internalize our true nature as Atma, so that we illuminate unpleasant situations, but we are not upset by these unpleasant situations. Now, our life involves a lot of roles that we need to play. What do? Do not identify with the role, but play the role to the best possible. Our role may be as a brother, as a son, as a friend, as a boss, as an employee. Now remember, all these roles have their own challenges. as an Atma, as a role play. Swami Anubhavananda has said a great truth. There is no complete solution to any problem. As a father, as a brother, as a husband, there are certain challenges which have no complete solution. But on the other hand, if you see yourself as Atma, you will discover that there is no problem. So this is Krishna's message in the opening verse, and Swami Dayananda Saraswati says, meditate on this verse. This verse understood can give you great dividends. The other verses I will go very quickly. Shamala, if you can chant this, please.
Natvevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadhipaha nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamatah param.
See the greatness of Sri Krishna's teaching, how Atma Vidya is brought out in his first teaching verse, where he says, as Atma, you are eternal. Very poetically, there are a lot of double negatives. Look at the word Janadipa. Krishna says, Arjuna, can you see all the kings here? Now, these people have been there they have been there in the past. They will be there in the future. I have been there in the past. I will be there in the future. You have been there in the past. You will continue to be there in the future. All of us as Atma are there from the very beginning. If there is a beginning, we will continue to be there. And therefore, as Atma, there is no question of death. Our true nature is eternal. Next verse, please, Shamala.
Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvananjara tatha dehantara praptihi dhirastatra na muhyate.
In this verse, Sri Krishna wants us to clearly understand the difference between Deha, the body, and Dehin, the indweller within the body. The Atma is the indweller who uses this body, who is the possessor of this body. And that is what I need to see all the time. As body, the body undergoes certain modifications all the time. But as the indweller, the word Deha means Daha. That is that which is worth burning. That's what it is saying. See, when we study the Bhagavad Gita, remember, we are studying it not as a text. We are studying it to discover our true nature. And through all these verses, Swamiji says, as the body is growing, graying, and going. This verse says, at one time, I was a small child, and then youth, and then old age. In Tattva Bodha, the same things are given into 6 categories. I come into being or asti, I'm born, jayate, vardate, I grow, viparini mate, undergo certain modifications, apakshiyate, there is a certain decay, and finally this body dies. So this verse says, the body undergoes certain changes, but do not identify. Dhirastara. Now, Dhiraha is a Viveki Purusha, one who knows the difference between Deha and Dehin, the indweller. Such a person, na muhyati, is not sorrowful. Next verse, please.
Matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agama payino nityaha tam stitikshasva bharata.
Having clearly told us that I am Atma, who's eternal, it is the body-mind that undergoes certain changes. Sri Krishna in the 14th and 15th verse gives 2 very important ideas what we need to do. Matra sparsha. Ma means to measure. Tra means the instrument of measurement. So matra really means my sense organs. Sparsha means the sense objects. Whenever my sense organs interact with the sense objects, O Kaunteya, Sita Ushna Sukha Dukkadaya, you will experience hot, cold, you will experience happiness and sorrow. But Sri Krishna says, all these happen in the domain of Anatma. Anatma is impermanent. It comes and goes. When there is something that comes and goes, don't invest too much on the anatma. Even if you feel sorrowful, remember this is going to be temporary. And as long as we know it is all temporary, tam stitikshasva bharata. Therefore, I want you to be mentally strong. That is why among all the spiritual practices, we are trained to do various forms of tapasya, various forms of fasting, various forms of situations where we are kept waiting. Even in a temple, sometimes I may have to wait. And whenever I have to wait, let it be a form of a sadhana that I can wait, I can fast, I'm not going to be upset. And that is what is called titiksha. Tough times never last, but tough people do. 15th verse, please.
Yam hina vyathayantete purusham purusharshabha samadukha sukham dhiram somrutatvaya kalpate.
Another very important verse where Sri Krishna wants us to be Purusha Rishabha. The best among human beings is Yatayanti, one who is not disturbed by, one who has a samatvam, a poised mind. When happiness happens, I'm not too elated. When sorrow comes, I do not become depressed. And he says, such a person who is the best among human beings, who is a Rishabha among the human beings, is Kalpate, is fit for Amritatva, for immortality. Swamiji gives us this nice poem. Give me the strength to change that which can be changed. Give me the strength to accept that which cannot be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference. I would like to emphasize in this verse the word Rishabha. Rishabha is often referred to Nandi, who is always with Lord Shiva and is considered the Parama Bhakta of Lord Shiva, who is always waiting for a darshan of the Lord. Can we be Rishabhas among human beings? In the Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a nice verse which says, Om Yas Chandasam Rishabho Vishwarupa. Om, among all the Vedic mantras, is the most Sreshta. And so too, can we be the most Sreshta among human beings who have a mind who is not going to be too much perturbed by anything external. And such a person who has a mind is fit for spirituality. Finally, verse 16, please.
Nasato vidyate bhavaha na bhavo vidyate sataha ubhayorapi drushtontaha tvanayos tattvadarshibihi.
Swamiji says this is one of the most difficult and the most important verses which we need to be very clear, because here we are talking about the difference between Sat and Asat. Sat means that which is always there. And Sri Krishna says that which is there can never become non-existent, and the non-existent has no existence of its own. And wise people clearly know the difference between Sat and Asat. Now, this is the basis of all the verses that we will be studying in the next class. So when you hear of the verses, na jayate mriyate va nainam chindanti shastrani, this understanding between what is Sat and what is Asat. Now, Sat is that which is there all the time. In Tattva Bodha, we said that which is there in all three periods of time. That which appears in one phase, that means this world is available during Jagrat, it disappears in Swapna or Shushupti. Therefore, the world is Asat. Now, this world appears real to me. That is why this word Asat does not mean it is not existent, but it means it is experientially available, but not actually there as real as my true nature of consciousness. So that which is independently existent is Sat. That which has got a borrowed existence is Mityā or Asat. Now, this difference between Sat and Asat should be very clear. The Atma is Sat. my body mind is asat or there. For some time, it will not be there all the time. Now, this knowledge comes to us from the Shrutis. From the Shruti, it should become a yukti and anubhuti. That means it should be logically true for me and it should be part of my experience. Unless the Shruti verses become logically true and it is there part of my experience and therefore part of my knowledge. Now, the Shruti says you are eternal. Now, how do our teachers tell us logically and through our own experience? The classical example, they say, is to look at your own photograph when you are a little boy. And then you see your photographs as you have grown over the years. Now, one thing is certain. I have lived in so many bodies. My body has undergone so much change, but the one who has been in and through these bodies has never undergone any changes. So my own anubhuti, and through logic, I can say that I have been in and through in this life itself. I do not know about my past life, or I do not know about what happens about death. But in this life itself, I can be certain that I have lived in different bodies. Now, in each day, I go through various avasthas. When I'm fast asleep, this world has disappeared. But then I know I have slept well. When I am dreaming, there is somebody who has witnessed my dream. Who is that who is aware of all the three avasthas? That is my real me. That is my Atma Tattva. So don't depend on the body mind. Initially depend on God and later on shift our understanding to the Atma that gives us real security. Such a wise person who has understood the distinction between Sat and Asat will not suffer, will not be really sad. And this is the essence of this mantra, Asato ma Satgamaya, Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya. If I know the difference between Sat and Asat, that is true spiritual wisdom, and such a person does not have death. In conclusion, this knowledge that I am Atma can give us tremendous freedom, and Vedanta therefore helps you to solve all worldly problems without undergoing through any suffering. I will conclude the session through a story which will bring about the same Atma Vidya. And this story is about, it's not a story, it's something that really happened. Somewhere near Bangkok, there was a temple where there was a huge statue of Buddha. And as the temple had to be renovated, the statue had to be relocated. In the process of shifting the statue breaks, and to their amazement, they discover that this is not an ordinary statue of Buddha, but a golden statue of Buddha. The story goes, when the Buddhist monks made this golden statue, they did not have the means to protect it. And so they quickly covered it with clay. And it was such a closely guarded secret. When they died, their followers died, they had forgotten that in this temple, they had a golden statue of Buddha. Now, for our own understanding, externally, all of us look as body mind very ordinary, like a clay statue of Buddha. But let this story remind us that within me and within all people around me, there is the golden Buddha, the Atma Tattva, waiting to be discovered through the study of the Gita, through our DISHA classes. Let this become a matter of conviction so that I can say with certainty what Swamiji wants us to remember, that I am of the nature of eternal and all-pervading consciousness. And this Atma Tattva is the only source of permanent peace, security, and happiness. This Atma Tattva enlivens my body, and through this body, I'm able to experience this whole world. As I am of a higher order of reality, anything that happens to this world or body-mind cannot affect me really. Whenever I forget this, life becomes a burden. And when I remember this, life becomes a blessing. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Dr. Sandhya Ravi will now conduct a quiz on what we have studied. Over to you, Dr. Sandhya.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So we've just heard the 6 verses from the second chapter, and this quiz is primarily focused on these verses. Question number 1. What is the essence of the Gita that is condensed in verse 2.11? So the answer is Atma Ajnanam Samsara Karanam, Atma Jnanam Moksha Karanam. Self-ignorance is the cause of samsara. Self-knowledge is the solution. So the entire essence of the Gita we can get from this very verse. Question 2. In the same verse, Krishna says, Panditaha na anushocanti. What is the meaning of Pandita? Is it a learned person? Is it a knowledgeable person? The answer is a person with Atma Jnanam. Panda is Atma Vishaya Buddhihi. And the key message that we get from this statement is that wise do not grieve about the past, present, or future. Moving on to question number 3. If ignorance or avidya can be considered as bacteria, what could be the medicine or the antibiotic that can eradicate it? Jnanam is the one and only medicine that can eliminate ignorance. Jnanat eva kaivalya. In that same first verse 2.11, Prajnavadamscha Bhashase is what Krishna refers to Arjuna as Prajnavadamscha Bhashase. Why does he refer to Arjuna as Prajnavadan? Arjuna speaks about Kulakshaya, Kula Dharma, Jati Dharma, and Varna Shankara, all of which we have learned in the first chapter, where he seemingly knowledgeably speaks about these things, which he does not realize are temporary and will get destroyed. So that is why Krishna refers to him as being seemingly knowledgeable, Prajnavada. What was the incidental problem that triggered the fundamental problem for Arjuna? All of us face these situations in life. We forget our real nature because of incidental problems. The incidental problem was whether to fight the war. That was the first and foremost problem that Arjuna faced. The fundamental problem was that this triggered the eternal problem of attachment and sorrow. Krishna used 3 strategies to motivate Arjuna to fight. What were these 3 strategies, and which one of them is primarily the theme or primarily dealt with in Bhagavad Gita? So the 3 strategies, as we have heard in this very class, he used the philosophical angle, Adhyatmika Drishti. But like Sir said, when we are emotionally down, our intellect does not work. Then he brought in the ethical or the Dharmika Drishti, where he pointed out Arjuna's Swadharma. And then he moved on to the worldly approach of the Laukika Drishti, which is based on situations and people. The Bhagavad Gita primarily deals with the philosophical angle and the ethical angle. So a little bit of language quiz here. Let us look at the features of Atma, the Sanskrit terminology. The Atma is ever the subject, never the object of experience. The Sanskrit word for that is Aprameya. It is eternal. The next word is Nityaha. It is changeless through all situations. Nirvikara. It is all-pervading. Sarvagata. It is non-doer and non-enjoyer. Akarta and Abhokta. So these are all the Sanskrit words for these characteristics of Atma. Next question. In verse 2.13, that is Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantarat praptir dhirastatra namuhyati. In Tattva Bodha, we have seen that there is an equivalent of this. Kaumaram yauvanam jara. talk about 6 changes that the body undergoes, starting from asti, jayate, vardhate, viparinimate, apakshiyate, and vinashyati. So that is condensed as kaumaram, yauvanam, jara. The next question is from verse 15, where Yamhina vyathyante purusham purushashabha samadukha sukham dhiram sauma mritvaya kalpati. So what is the meaning of the word dhiram? Dhiram is a discriminative person, one who accepts the body as a temporary medium, a wise one. When he engages in action, it is in the form of a renunciation. What is the nature of anatma experienced through the sense organs? So we see it as pair of opposites, sitoshnu and sukha dukkha, agama apayana, that means they come and go, and they are always impermanent, anitya. Again, we've just seen verse 2.15, where Krishna addresses Arjuna as Purusha Rishabha. What is the Purusha Rishabha? What does this mean? Why does he call him that? It means Sreshta Purushaha, best among men. We have just heard the example of Nandi, and Rishabha here refers to someone like a Nandi who is patiently waiting in front of God. A person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. We've also heard in verse number 14, Matra Sparshastu Kaunteya Shitoshna Sukha Dukkha Sakara. So what is this Sitoshna Sukha Dukkhadi Sahishnutvam? The ability to, tolerate this. So which of the sadhana sampattis does this refer to? That is titiksha in Tattva Bodha. That is the discrimination to know what can be changed and what cannot be changed. This is also mentioned in Viveka Chudamani Adi Shankara's work. Next question. In verse number 2.15, what is the word for Atma Jnanam? Yamhina vyatayantet purusham purushashabha samadukkam sukham dhiram somritvaya kalpate. What is the word? It is amritatvaya. That is for liberation. That is the word for Atma Jnana. In verse, again going back to verse 2.11, there are 2 words quoted in 2.11 for the word wise. What are they? Prajnavan and Pandita. Both the words mean wise. What words do you use to indicate the impermanence of the Atma? We've already seen it in a previous question. Agama, apayina are the words used to indicate impermanence of the Atma. The last question. In the study of the scriptures, the connection between the study and the benefit one gets is called Anubandha Chatushtaya. What are the 4 factors to be considered with respect to study of the Gita? One is the Vishaya, the subject. In the Gita, it is the Brahma Vidya. The second is Adhikari, or the eligibility. And in the Gita, it is Arjuna, which is basically all of us. The Prayojanam, the benefits that we get from studying the Gita is our ability to overcome the sorrow of samsara. And the Sambandham is the relationship with God that we get to understand. Thank you. Hari Om, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya ma'am, for a wonderful teaching session which covered the entire talk of Dr. Hegde sir. Thank you, Dr. Hegde sir, for a mesmerizing, absorbing, and enchanting talk. My dear friends, hope you enjoyed this session. We'll come back with DISHA 4 on Monday, 11th of April, 2022. Before that, this Friday on 8th of April, we'll continue with our study of Bhakti Yoga. Please log in by 6:45 p.m. on Friday. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om.